I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and I like nothing better than tramping over the glorious Southdowns. These chalky, undulating hills were just made for human enjoyment, whether on foot, on horseback, or even on two wheels. But they are vulnerable and constantly under threat. Fortunately, there is a society whose purpose is to ensure that the Southdowns are in a tip-top condition for all to enjoy.
I'm Glynn Jones and I'm a trustee of the Southdowns Society, and currently I'm one of the vice chairmen. The Friends of the Southdowns is a body that's born out of an historical body which was set up in 1923, but currently the Friends of the Southdowns are the critical friend of the Southdowns National Park Authority, and we work closely with them to achieve the objectives of the national park. Prior to 1947, you could do what you like in the countryside. There weren't any planning regulations, and that was, as I said, we were started initially in 1923, and that was by a group of young people who were concerned about development on the Southdowns. And after the First World War, the homes for heroes at Peacehaven, the Peacehaven plots, we saw cliff tops just divided up into little squares and crisscross roads. And the aim of providing homes for heroes was laudable, but the effect on the Downs was very, very worrying. And that's really what started these young people to want to set up what they then called the Society of Sussex Downs Men, and it kept that name for a very long time. Downland is what they call a plagio-climax, which means it's a climax vegetation, but it's held at that stage by man's activity, and in this case grazing. And so if you don't graze the Southdowns, then you will lose the downland. You will gain more scrub and more secondary woodland, but on balance the downland is the more valuable, and that will be lost. So doing nothing is a threat to the Southdowns, and it's not the best grazing in the world, and so there is a tendency for people to go to the richer soils for grazing, and so there's a definite intervention needed to make sure that areas are grazed. We need to build more homes, we need places to build them, and there aren't always the spaces within the already developed areas, and which means you've got to move out. And so we're not anti-development, but we're anti the wrong sort of development. And then there's the roads issue. The classic one that we are dealing with at the moment is improvements to the A27. If you use the A27, it's an awful road to drive on. Traffic jams all over the place. It really is very frustrating for the motorist. However, it runs right along the edge, and in some cases cuts slightly through the national park. And improvements to the A27 are not necessarily improvements to the national park. Fracking. It's a classic. The geology of the Downs means that in some of the lower stratas beneath us, there is possibly shale gas. And the government announced some time ago a ban or prohibition on fracking in national parks. But we're not sure that actually does protect the national park, because what it appears to do is it stops them boring holes in the national park. It doesn't stop them going outside the boundary, boring a hole and then running a horizontal shaft into the strata they're looking for. Along with that is all the threats to the water table. And there's a massive water table within the Southdowns, which we all rely on. It's so big that a drop of rain falling on the Downs at Brighton takes 20 years to come out the tap in Brighton. The Forestry Commissioner proposed 75 lodges in woodland in the heart of the national park, just down the road from here. They haven't done a planning application, but they've just talked about this is what they want to do. And we think that's wholly inappropriate. Well, there's a conflict. We want people to enjoy the national park. We don't want them coming out and we don't want the woodlands being filled up with, it's not the happy campus so much as the buildings and the roads and the infrastructure that goes with it in what could be an inappropriate place. We're really lucky. We've got a lot of volunteer, we call them district officers, who take an interest in planning, and they study all the planning applications within their patch. They've all got them allocated patches. They study the planning applications. In some cases they will just come to us with a suggested response, which we may then send out as a press release. In other cases they will say, well, what do we do about this? And our planning officer has recently taken early retirement, unfortunately through ill health, and he was so well respected that if he said something, the planners sat up and they listened. They did respect his opinion. It's proving increasingly difficult to get new members, I have to say. Our membership is very slightly declining, and it's still a healthy membership, but it would not be prudent of us not to take note of the fact it's declining and think, how will we be managing this in 10 years, 20 years time? And so we have to look at encouraging people to join, but also I think we need to look at alternatives to joining. We need supporters. We don't actually need a member, although the subs are where most of our funding comes from, but we need supporters. And if it's a case of Joe Bloggs wants to support us on this issue and he's prepared to give us a few quid towards that issue, and he doesn't care about the next one, but there's somebody down the road who does, and that model might well work, and we've got to find ways of developing that and working with that. But what we do sort of falls into three main areas. So we've got protection of the Downs, to seek to protect it from damaging change, not stop change, but protect it from damaging change. We want to promote the enjoyment of the Downs, and there are various ways we can do that. We run a guided walks program ourselves. We've got lots of volunteer walks leaders who have good followings, and almost every day of the week, it's possible to do at least one walk with the Friends of the Southdowns, with people who are like-minded and enjoy that countryside. Back in the Countryside and Rights of Way Act in 2000, the concept of open country, freedom to roam, it was wrongly called, but you all know what I'm talking about when I say freedom to roam. That concept was introduced, and there are 10 areas within the Southdowns where we produce maps of those areas, showing where you can get onto these areas, where the gateways are and the stiles are, and where you can get off it, and what might be of interest, archaeological interest or wildlife interest within that area. We've produced 10 maps of those areas, which you can download from our website. So that's another way we can help people to enjoy the Downs. And there's enhancement, and if the landscape is changing and there's something we can do, or we can campaign to do to improve it, then that's what we'll do. And it's very, very small stuff. The National Trust at Saddlescombe Farm near Devil's Dyke at the back of Brighton have started a school centre there, an education centre, and the Society was able to contribute some funding towards converting some farm buildings into a classroom, and it's a very useful space, and it's worked really well. And it's really just a few £1,000s towards something like that can get enormous benefits to the children, who then bring their parents back to enjoy it as well. So that's really good. And a church, for instance, needs a lavatory and a kitchen, and we've contributed to that sort of thing in the past. So that sort of improvement. There's a place on the Downs over near Midhurst where there's a car park overlooking the view across the Downs, and there were two things there. One was there was a viewpoint where there used to be a view, but there isn't anymore because the trees have grown up. So some clearance of trees helped to bring the view back, and then clearing up all the rubbish that had been chucked over the edge of the car park. I mean, that was another campaign that we were able to take part in and actively get out and actually pick up some of the rubbish.